When people ask me what generation PokeMMO is, it's really hard to explain. You see, PokeMMO includes the storylines of generations 1 through 5, but has mechanics from Pokemon as recent as the Scarlet and Violet DLC. So how do you explain to the new players all of the custom balancing changes PokeMMO seems to have? Well, I'm hoping this video does the trick. And as always, if you feel like I missed anything important in today's video, feel free to leave a comment with other important changes. Also, keep in mind this video took a while to make. I spent months meticulously going over this list, trying my best not to miss anything. So taking a quick second to like the video is hugely appreciated. And subscribe if you've been getting sucked into PokeMMO like many other players and want to see daily videos on the topic. But enough intro stalling for content, let's go ahead and jump into the list. Number 1 is going to be Garchomp not having access to Swords Dance in PvP. Now, many long-term PokeMMO players know that for a very long time, Garchomp just didn't have access to Swords Dance at all. However, recently, they did actually start allowing him to have access of Swords Dance in PvM and gym lines and storylines and stuff like that, but you still can't use him in PvP. He is actually banned, at least him with Swords Dance in the OU tier. And this nicely transitions into step number 2, Hydreigon not having Draco Meteor in PvP. Very similar situation, Hydreigon didn't have access to Draco Meteor for a very long time, but it ended up getting banned in PvP specifically, so you can at least use it against the Elite Fours now. Now, a lot of people asked, hey, why are these dragons nerfed? Why nerf Garchomp and Hydreigon? I don't understand. And it's important to understand that PokeMMO's PvP metagame is just wildly different from traditional Pokemon. We don't have a lot of the same things as traditional Pokemon. We don't have access to Fairy type. We didn't have access to Assault Gear for a long time. We don't have access to Hidden Ability Regenerator Slowbro. A lot of these things make it so that Dragon types are a little stronger, and Dragon types were notoriously too strong already in Generation 5, and that's why in Generation 6 they added the Fairy type. So this is a pretty good way to go ahead and add some more proper customized balance to the PokeMMO metagame. If you disagree with it, that's totally fine. Take it up on the PokeMMO official forums, not in my comments. Number 3 on this list, probably one of the most important for most players in this video, is going to be that there are only 7 legendaries right now that are permanently ownable and usable in PokeMMO at this current time. This is actually subject to change. For a very long time, 0 legendaries were actually ownable permanently in PokeMMO. They used to operate off of a King of the Hill style minigame for a very long time, and there are still King of the Hill style legendaries, such as Mewtwo and Keldeo, but these are the permanently ownable ones. There is Shaman, which is only catchable during the Lunar New Year event every year, which is around January or February, and there is Articuno, Moltres, Zapdos, Entei, Raikou, and Suicune. I have a full video breaking down how to catch these and how to acquire these, which should be linked in the description. But as a quick TLDR, after beating the storylines in each region, you have a pretty rare chance, somewhere between 1 out of 1,000 and 1 out of 8,000, to randomly single encounter one of these only once per month. Every single month there's a different rotation, so as I'm recording this, I believe Zapdos is the wild encounter in Kanto, for example. You can get multiple legendaries, as you can see here, once they rotate back around, but only after waiting 3 months or so, for example, for Raikou for the next rotation. Once again, full videos on that topic linked in the description. Number 4 on this list is going to be the teleport buff. Now, if you're familiar with Pokemon past Generation 5, this will probably come to no surprise to you, but a lot of people who pick up PokeMMO are playing from Gen 1 to 5, and kind of are only familiar with those regions. But past Generation 5 and one of the later generations, Teleport got access to a pretty insane buff that made it one of the best moves in PvP. Now, Teleport itself operates as a super useful utility move in Pokemon where you're able to teleport back to the PC and save a lot of time when shiny hunting or EV training. But in PvP, specifically singles, Teleport allows you to stay one step ahead of your opponent consistently. Teleport is really good for the same reasons that U-Turn and Volt Switch are good, but arguably Teleport is even better, because you're able to put Teleport on a bulky Pokemon. It has negative priority, so it's able to tank a hit and then switch into a frail Pokemon. A textbook example of this would be, imagine that you're either a Chansey or a Blissey with Teleport facing down a superior. If they go for their contrary Leaf Storm, then you get to teleport out after them and bring in something faster and one-shot the superior, threatening it to either forcing it to switch out or just KOing their superior. Or if they happen to switch out, then you get to switch out after them and then gain priority against their next Pokemon. Teleport is really, really powerful. So if you're coming up from Generation 1 through 5 PvP up to PokeMMO, make sure to abuse Teleport Pokemon. Next up, number 5 on our list, we have the Hail buff slash change. Just like in traditional Pokemon and similar to the Teleport buff, in later generations of Pokemon, they changed Hail over to Snow. So now we have a different effect from that. Instead of the Hail chip every turn, Ice types actually get a 1.5 times defense boost whenever they have Snow summoned. This allows some bulky Ice types to at least have a chance. Even though Hail isn't exactly good in PokeMMO, I'd say it's quite good in NU at least. Now, this is something I'm actually not as familiar with because I don't really play traditional Pokemon and I only really play PokeMMO, so I don't know if traditional Pokemon has the same nerf, but number 6 on our list is the Baton Pass nerf. I was a little worried there because I almost didn't have a single Pokemon with this move because it is so bad in PokeMMO. And in my opinion, that is a good thing. Baton Pass meta was one of the most frustrating metas in all of Pokemon PvP if you played it. For those who don't know, Baton Pass was a move that passed stats along to different Pokemon and was super good in generations 2 through 3. The idea of Baton Pass is super cool. Set up a lot of stats, maybe Sword Stances or other stats on a weaker Pokemon, and then or a stronger Pokemon, a tanky Pokemon, and then switch it over to a weaker Pokemon to make them more powerful. However, that's not actually how it ended up working. What you would end up doing is just end up setting up status moves like Sword Stance on Scizor, and then just transfer that over to another strong Pokemon like Tyranitar. It just ended up making strong Pokemon even stronger. So in PokeMMO, Baton Pass doesn't pass stats. All it does is it passes substitutes and crit chance with focus energy, weirdly enough. I thank Arceus every day for this nerf because this meta was hell. Number 7 is a tough one for a lot of new players to get used to, understandably so. There's a lot of items in PokeMMO that become consumables that help out the economy. Things like Amulet Coin and Lucky Eggs. So in traditional Pokemon, usually an Amulet Coin would be a held item by a Pokemon, and it would boost the amount of Pokeyen you would get for reward. Now, that's all fun and dandy in a single-player Pokemon experience, but in a Pokemon MMO with a proper economy, Pokeyen means a lot more and is a lot more valuable. So the way that Amulet Coin works in PokeMMO is you consume it, and it ends up giving you a boosted 50% Pokeyen earned from trainers and gym reruns. And gym reruns is one of the cornerstone money-making methods of PokeMMO, so they are super important. And since Amulet Coins are consumed, they have a pretty consistent value of somewhere between 15 to 20k, depending on the market. There's also things called Riches Charms, which are very similar to Amulet Coins, but have a higher boost. So there's Riches Charms 75%, which boosts your Pokeyen value by obviously 75% instead of the 50%. And then there's also Riches Charms 100%, which is a lot pricier, but can make you a lot more Pokeyen if you have the skill to do so. Lucky Eggs are a pretty cornerstone item in traditional Pokemon, giving you a flat boost to all of the XP you gain. Once again, that would be pretty problematic in PokeMMO because once there were more and more Lucky Eggs coming into the game, the price of Lucky Egg would just continuously crash and crash and crash as there's constantly more supply every day, but you're not really sucking any of them out of the game. So to do so, they had to implement some sort of sync for them and make Lucky Eggs consumable. Normal size Lucky Eggs, I believe, give you a 2 times boost for XP for, I believe, either half an hour or an hour. And then Lucky Egg Smalls give you a 1.5 times boost for 30 minutes. There are also things called XP Charms, which do very similar things. XP Charm 50% increases the XP you gain by 50% for an hour. And then there's XP Charm 25% and XP Charm 100%. I will say XP Charm 25% are kind of a rarer old mechanic. You don't really see those too much. I would just stick to XP Charm 50% and 100%. It can be super worth it to pick these up to save your time, especially in that later game. Number 8, following a similar trend of consumable items, there is no permanent shiny charm in PokeMMO. However, there are consumable shiny charms that give you a 10% boost for 1 hour. I have a video explaining and talking about whether I think shiny charms are worth it or not. TLDR, they're kind of expensive, and I would rather recommend donator status, which gives you a more fixed rate, another 10% at a longer rate, but it's kind of a more expensive upfront cost. Shiny charm is a lot of fun though, since you can actually link up with 3 other friends, and those friends will also receive a 5% shiny hunting bonus. But once again, it's only for 1 hour. Number 9 on our list is probably one of the most important balancing changes in any Pokemon MMO ever, and it's also one of the most standoffish mechanics to new players. But it's also genius and what allows our game to survive, so it's quite a complicated thing. I'm talking about how breeding consumes Pokemon. Breeding is kind of a complicated thing to learn, and I really recommend watching one of my full in-depth guides on it. But as a quick TLDR, breeding essentially consumes your Pokemon always. If I were to put this Psyduck and this Eevee into the daycare, it will come out, it will consume both of them, and then give me this Eevee as a result. However, at the cost of consuming your Pokemon, you get a much more controlled breed. As you can see here, since I put a specific item on my Psyduck, I'm going to 100% chance transfer over the 31 speed IV. I'm also going to roll these IVs in kind of an average between each Pokemon, and you can really control and get those 5x31 competitive Pokemon. This does a lot of positive things. Number one, it gives value to 1x31 Pokemon and makes it so that catching Pokemon is a really good moneymaker, especially for new players. It gives new players a lot of power because of that. Secondly, it adds a lot of consistency and balance to PvP. No longer do you have to go into the wild and randomly hope that you find a Starmie with 31 speed and timid nature, and if you don't, you're at a huge disadvantage. Everybody can kind of make Pokeyen and get access to these competitive Pokemon, and it makes PvP a lot more balanced. But once again, it's also really overwhelming and really hard to learn, I feel like, for new players, but once you get the hang of it, it is pretty easy. But that's easier said than done. Breeding is super important and once again a cornerstone of the game. I absolutely recommend that everybody try to learn it. I know that I was really stubborn about it and didn't learn the system for quite a while, and that was one of the biggest mistakes I made. Next up, number 10. This is a crucial one for when you start getting into that mid-game of PokeMMO. It's that most Pokeballs in PokeMMO have been reworked and have different mechanics or catch rates. You can either pause the video here and look over them, or visit the PokeMMO wiki/Pokeballs to learn more. A really good example of a hyper-specific PokeMMO Pokeball change is actually with repeat balls. You see, repeat balls work in a way that is kind of strange. It starts at a 1.0 times catch rate, and then once you catch 15 Pokemon of the same exact species, let's say 15 Dittos in a row, then each Ditto you catch there forward will have that 2.5 times catch rate. But if you catch a Whismur or some other Pokemon in between, it will reset to 1.0. Hilariously, because of this change, repeat ball is actually pretty bad right now in PokeMMO, but it was also the best Pokeball in PokeMMO for like 4 years, so it makes sense that it finally got nerfed as of recent. And maybe by the time you're watching this video, it will have gotten rebuffed or changed in some way. The PokeMMO devs are constantly buffing and nerfing and changing the Pokeball metagame to truly make it so a bunch of different Pokeballs are viable at different farming locations, which is why I keep so many different Pokeballs on me. On to number 11. The catch rate formula in PokeMMO doesn't directly come from any generation. It seems to be custom, but the community doesn't actually know for sure. I don't have the source offhand, unfortunately, but I remember a forum post of a player asking the developers, hey, which generation does the catch rate come from? And they said Generation 5, I believe, and then they pointed out, well, hey, in Generation 5, with this situation, with Ditto, False Swipe, and Sport at 1 HP, shouldn't that be 100% catch rate? And then they were like, oh, yeah, actually, we did custom change that one. And they asked about Beldum, and they were like, oh, yeah, we did custom change that one too, actually. So it seems to be, not to doubt the devs, it does seem like there is a lot of custom changes that they don't necessarily want to talk about. Or maybe they just genuinely forget. What do I know? But the point of this tip is to remind you that you can't just run Generation 5 catch calcs in PokeMMO. It's not really going to work like that. And then for number 12, it's kind of funny that it took me so long to get here, but number 12 is that the shiny rates in PokeMMO is 1 out of 30,000, making it the most difficult Pokemon game to shiny hunt in by far. However, it's also not as crazy as you might think. Yes, there are 2,000 to 4,000 hour long hunts, like going for a shiny Rampardos or going for a shiny Shuckle. However, there are also a lot of good ×5 horde shiny hunts, like things like shiny Excelgor, things like shiny Golurk, shiny Druddigon, shiny Heatmore. All of these shinies can be gotten in around 30 hours on average, which is actually comparable to single encounter hunting back in traditional Pokemon with the 1 out of 8,000 or so shiny rate. It's around the same amount of hours for the fastest shiny in PokeMMO. And I have tons of shiny hunting guides on my channel if you're looking for that. Shiny hunting is by far my favorite thing to do in PokeMMO, so don't let the big number scare you. If anything, it should be a good challenge to go for. But if running back and forth in grass for 100 hours doesn't really sound like your cup of tea, that also makes a whole lot of sense to me. Number 13 on our list is that the overall AI in PokeMMO is a whole lot smarter than traditional Pokemon. Whether you're fighting wild Pokemon, NPCs, gym leaders, or the Elite Four, they're gonna make smarter moves and better switches depending on the situation. Now, PokeMMO is absolutely no Emerald Kaizo. In my opinion, it's actually kind of a good in-between. If you're looking for a slightly more difficult Pokemon storyline, but not something as hard as Emerald Kaizo or those ROM hacks that are made to be difficult, PokeMMO is, in my opinion, a brutally underrated, perfect solution. This game will seem unfair at times, but also very, very winnable. Sometimes, however, you do end up running into that Growlithe with Fire Gem on the SSN randomly that'll take out one of your Pokemon in your Nuzlocke, so you gotta watch out for that. Now, for number 14, if you played any Pokemon generation other than Gen 5, this is going to make a lot of sense to you and seem obvious, but in Generation 5, this was a huge problem. For number 14, I'm talking about non-infinite weather. There is no infinite weather setting in PokeMMO, which is very obvious to a lot of traditional Pokemon players, but once again, if you only played Gen 5, you may not know this. In Generation 5, if you switched in a Pelipper with Drizzle, it would actually stay rainy weather until a different Pokemon changed the weather. Infinite weather was notoriously one of the most broken things in Pokemon ever, and thankfully it is nerfed out of PokeMMO. Number 15 is the fact that not all hidden ability Pokemon are in the game. This one is kind of similar to Shinies in Pokemon Go, how not all Pokemon in Pokemon Go actually have a shiny variant. They kind of trickle them in with little events and make it a fun little gathering. Bringing new hidden ability Pokemon to the game, things like Sheer Force Nidoking, can really shake up the metagame and change things drastically, so PokeMMO usually errs on the side of caution and slowly introduces these mechanics to not overwhelm the meta. Once again, the PokeMMO meta is very different from traditional Pokemon, and the devs seem to care a lot more about PvP balance than Game Freak or Nintendo. I think this is a hugely positive asset for the game, but a lot of casual players definitely complain about this and aren't a huge fan when their favorite Pokemon doesn't have access to a really crucial hidden ability, which I can super understand and empathize with. And next up, number 16 is that Blaziken doesn't have hidden ability access. Now, this might actually change in the future. They've kind of been teasing at this, but Blaziken with Speed Boost is notoriously one of the most broken Pokemon abilities. If you don't know, Speed Boost is an ability that just passively boosts your speed once every turn, so you get +1 speed every turn. If you come in with a Pokemon and then just protect, install one turn, you get a free speed boost. On a Pokemon like Blaziken with a super good offensive typing with fire fighting, and then also having 120 base attack, 110 speed, with its only downside really being its frailty and its speed, if you can make up its speed with speed boost and get pretty fast, this thing becomes a monster and starts sweeping teams on its own. Speed Boost Blaziken is notoriously Ubers in PokeMMO and super duper overpowered, so therefore it's not in the game quite yet. Especially without other checks and balances like Landorus T to even keep it in check, there's a ton of reasons to why it would be too broken. So to all those fire chicken lovers that have been advocating it forever, I feel for you, I empathize with you, but I think game balance is more important than casual players' feelings. Number 17 on our list is going to refer to storyline battles that have been converted for PokeMMO balancing. So things like the Lake of Rage Gyarados right here, the Ho-Oh boss fight in Johto, and then the Giratina fight in Sinnoh. All of these battles where you would normally be able to encounter and catch a really unique, legendary, or shiny Pokemon have all been turned into boss battles, which in my opinion is a really fun mechanic for a Pokemon game, having to go against these big boss battles and balancing around them and planning ahead of them in the storyline really shakes things up and changes strategies. For example, if you reach the Lake of Rage Johto Gyarados fight and you don't have an electric type yet, like an Ampharos with Discharge, you're going to have a tough time, but if you prepare for that ahead of time, you can just sweep through this guy. Number 18 is kind of a strange one, but super important for first-time players. You actually heal when doing the Elite Four for your first time. You actually heal after each E4 leader. So for example, if I were to go to Kanto, and I were to fight and defeat Lorelei, I would actually get my party fully healed heading into Bruno, and then the same for Agatha, and the same for Lance, and the same for your rival. This makes the first Elite Four run much easier, and I think pretty fair to new players, and it makes it more of a challenge rather than sort of a long-term slogfest. Number 19 is all about the later gen base stat changes. One of the biggest examples being Dugtrio, which got a boost from 80 attack up to 100. Absolutely making it a much more pivotal meta threat. This full list will be linked in the description, of course, and you can go through it at your own pace, since some of the changes are more important than others. Some of them are pretty important, like Pelipper getting that special attack boost is kind of nice. Some don't really factor in or change anything, like a Delcatty 20% speed boost isn't really going to impact things, but Masquerain, kind of underrated in PokeMMO, getting that special attack 20 boost and the speed 20 boost. Definitely check this list out. This is another one of those changes where if you're familiar with traditional current gen Pokemon, this really isn't going to mean much to you, but if you're a Gen 1 to 5 head like myself, this is pretty big news. We're back in the Lake of Rage for number 20, as number 20 is that there is no free shinies from any storyline. No Haxorus and Unova, no Gyarados from the Lake of Rage, no free shinies ever. They hurt the integrity of the game, they devalue shiny hunts, and they hurt the economy. Trust me when I say you will appreciate and love your shiny Gyarados that much more when you actually have to go put in the time and energy to hunt it. Next up, number 21 is all about Alpha Swarms. As you can see, swarms are a quite popular mechanic in PokeMMO. Now, this example is not an alpha swarm since those only happen every 6 hours or so. It's kind of hard to catch them for a recording for this video, but I do have a full video called Alpha Swarms Explained. If you Google that, it should pop up. If you have any more questions, comments, questions are always welcome. But as you can see, there's these Curlia sprites in the overworld. Quick little tip, if there's a bunch of people like this, it's kind of hard to see the Pokemon sprites in the overworld. You can go into your settings really quick, go to video, and then change your player render limit to 1. That'll make it so only one player will actually spawn around you. You can much more clearly see the Curlia sprites in the overworld. You can actually run into and talk to and encounter these Pokemon, and it'll give you a quick encounter like this. Now, alpha Pokemon specifically are much more like this Spirit Tomb, having this big red glow around them and having a much more large follower sprite. As you can see, this is larger than what a normal Spirit Tomb would be. Now, the important, crucial aspect of alpha Pokemon is this is how hidden ability Pokemon come into the game. As you can see, this Pokemon has hidden ability access because of the gem. There are a couple other methods of this via events and cherished balls and stuff like that, but generally, the main way that hidden ability Pokemon come into the game is via these alpha swarms. Alpha Swarms are a pretty unique mechanic in PokeMMO, and they're a really good money maker. They're a lot of fun, but they can also be a little difficult if you're a mid-level player. You definitely want to prepare some Pokemon, like some catching Pokemon, some Breloom, some Spirigulls, etc., to catch them appropriately and consistently. Number 22 is going to be about Secret Shinies. Once again, I have a video called Secret Shinies Explained. If you look that up, you'll see a lot more detail on it, but I'm just here to explain to you the basics of it. Secret Shiny is essentially an extra rare shiny. A Secret Shiny is 16 times rarer than a normal shiny. And the only major difference between a normal shiny and a secret shiny is that it's rarer and that it has a little particle and sound difference. So when you encounter a secret shiny, it sounds like this. Now, is that worth the 1,600 hours it would take to get one of those on average? Probably not. But if you're a crazy enough shiny hunter, you'll end up going for one. Number 23 is a pretty important one for any kind of player. Casuals, hardcore, medium tier, whatever you may be, you probably care about Ocarinas. HM Ocarinas are items that you can buy with RP or on the GTL, of course. The GTL can be used for anything. Technically, I guess I could have made a plot point or a point about the GTL. There is a global trade link or some sort of market. I could have been for that, but I don't know, it's kind of self-explanatory. But HM Ocarinas are these items that allow you to use HM moves without actually having the Pokemon in my party. So as you can see, throughout a lot of this video, I've been like flying around and stuff, and I don't have any Pokemon with flying type or that can learn fly in my party. How is that possible? And that's all due to HM Ocarinas. They're super useful, super luxurious. They're really just paying for convenience in a lot of the ways, but some of them can actually be kind of pragmatically helpful, like surf and fly, not having to have that Pokemon in your party for certain activities like XP training or EV training. That can free up an extra spot in your party to EV train or XP train one more Pokemon. Now, would I recommend new players buy HM Ocarinas? Not really. Once again, you're kind of paying for convenience, and I would recommend picking these up in the mid to late game. But obviously, it's up to you, whatever makes you happy. If throwing $2 or so at the game devs for making a fantastic game, makes you feel happy and you can pick up an Ocarina in the process, why not? Next up, number 24 is a super unintuitive one to a lot of people, but it's that eggs are actually time-based and not step-based. So what that means is if I just sit here with this egg in my party for around 5 minutes, it depends on the species, and it depends if you have flame body and donor status, which reduce the time it takes to hatch the egg. But if I just stand here and kind of AFK next to the PC with my egg in my party, it'll actually just hatch. Eggs do not hatch while sitting in your PC though. They do have to be in your party. So usually when shiny hunting for a rare Pokemon, people will make a bunch of batches, a bunch of boxes full of these eggs, and then hatch them all in one go. But as you can imagine, at 5 minutes per batch, that ends up taking quite a long time, which is why rare shinies are so long and difficult to hunt. It usually takes around 6 hours to hatch around 400 Pokemon, which is considered one batch when rare shunting. But that's not important for the average casual player. The main takeaway here is that eggs are time-based, not step-based. You don't have to bike back and forth. Number 25 is that Pokemon you get that are your starters from the storyline are shiny locked, unfortunately, and will always have neutral IVs with 15 across the board, a neutral nature, and are also untradeable. They're considered to be what is called a gift Pokemon. Now, this isn't nearly as exciting as trying to roll a high IV or good starter Pokemon, but it also increases consistency in balance among the storyline for different players and also helps out with Nuzlocke planning. In my opinion, the main reason this was implemented was because there were problems with players having a really bad starter Pokemon, let's say a superior with 5 or below special attack IV, and then like an adamant, like a negative special attack nature, maybe even something like careful, and then they were kind of just shit out of luck. Like if they had that problem, they would just be really stuck in terms of progressing certain storylines. They'd have to really go out of their way to like get a specific Pokemon other than their starter, and they'd be at a severe disadvantage. So it really does just help balance things out a lot. But in my opinion, number 26 is what actually makes up for number 25, and it's that you can actually catch and encounter starter Pokemon in the wild using a specific item called lures, which you can buy in pretty much any city. So let's say I was a new player and I was at Pewter City in Kanto, I could go buy one lure really quick for a couple hundred Pokeyen and then head over to Route 4. And as early as Route 4 in Kanto, I can actually pop a lure and encounter Charmander in the wild. If you want to know where you can catch Pokemon in the wild, you can always check the Pokedex. So if I check this, I can see Route 3, not Route 4, excuse me, Route 3 is where you can actually catch Charmander in the wild, and all of the starters will actually have this. So PokeMMO is one of the best games in my opinion. If you want to play through an entire storyline with just all 3 starter Pokemon, it's very, very doable. You can actually encounter Bulbasaur in the Viridian Forest, and then go find Squirtle with, once again, you have to be popping lures on Route 24. When you're popping a lure, it's a 5% chance to encounter that Pokemon, which isn't all too terrible, but it's going to be a little bit of a grind. The main thing is that it's going to be a pretty tough catch, so definitely make sure you have some way to put the Pokemon asleep or just be ready to spam a bunch of Pokeballs. Lures act a lot like reverse repels, and essentially when you activate them, you have X number of steps. You can see in the top left hand corner 243 lure steps, and these lures increase your encounters. They give you a 10% increased encounter rate. The foes will be slightly stronger. You can encounter more foes at the same time, more Pokemon, which means like double encounters and stuff like that, and then a 5% chance to get that lure exclusive species, which is often a starter Pokemon. Lures don't have benefits at every single route, but a lot of routes will have some really cool lore exclusive species. Lures were one of those updates that when they released, a lot of players were like, huh? Why? It was kind of confusing, but then as we've kind of learned about them and discovered them, lures were easily, in my opinion, one of the best updates to PokeMMO, honestly. They added new tiers to shiny hunting, new methods for hunting new Pokemon, new ways to go make Pokeyen, and they also took a little bit of Pokeyen out of the game, acting as a small Pokeyen sink. Which in an MMO, sinking currency out of the game is always a requirement for balancing the economy and inflation. Next up, number 27, is that there's a ton of instances of Pokemon having access to moves they don't normally have until later generations. Just to name a few examples, you have Machamp with access to Mach Punch, making it a mini Conkeldurr. Empoleon with access to Roost, which makes it a much more competitive threat. Torterra gaining access to Shell Smash, which once again happened in the recent Gen 9 DLC. And then Gliscor getting access to Crabhammer, which in my opinion is just kind of a cool move. I could sit here all day and talk about and name specific ability and move changes in PokeMMO, but it's really hard to compile a list of all of them. I would just recommend double checking the in-game Pokedex, which will tell you all of the abilities and moves a Pokemon can learn. Next up is that knockoff is only 20 BP in PokeMMO. This is really important since post knockoff's buff, it was one of the most powerful and spammable moves in Pokemon. It was really easy to get some sort of value with this move. Now, at 20 base power, knockoff's probably a little too weak, unfortunately, but it's really tough to balance this move, so far the PokeMMO devs have erred on the side of caution and just leaving it at 20 base power for the time being. Number 29, a very similar situation, is the move Outrage. Outrage gets really powerful when at its normal 120 base power, I believe, in the current generations. It sits at 90 base power in PokeMMO. Once again, way too weak for it to be usable. It's never used in PokeMMO. It's a terrible move, honestly, in PokeMMO, but at some point, we probably could see a small buff. And then number 30 is that there is no XP all in PokeMMO at all, but there is another item that kind of takes its place called the XP Reamplifier. This item essentially acts as an XP share all, but for a pretty steep price of 1000 RP, which you can buy for $10, or you could just buy $10 worth of RP vouchers on the GTL, which is what I usually do. I usually just go ahead and buy the actual in-game currency. If you look up 1000 RP, you can buy anything in the gift shop, anything bought with the premium currency, also with Pokeyen. So I always just buy things like this with my Pokeyen. I've been playing PokeMMO for over 10 years. I have over 7,000 hours in the game, and I've only ever spent $10 on this game. It is not pay to win. You can absolutely pave your own way and catch up to old players within a year or so. It will, however, take a lot of time and a lot of hard work. But the XP Reamplifier is a pretty interesting item. It's untradeable. It gives 25% of the XP to the lead Pokemon in the fight, and then also splits the XP among all the other Pokemon in the party, giving a bonus of 5% to each Pokemon. XP Reamplifier is an interesting item. It's not really worth it in my opinion. If you want to pick it up as a new player, I kind of understand because it's nice to have an XP all for the storyline to really balance things out. But other than that, I'd probably pick it up hyper late game. If you're sort of a big grinder at that point, those bonuses become worth it. I have a full video talking about whether I think XP Reamplifier is worth it or not. But that is everything I wanted to talk about today. PokeMMO has been in development for over 12 years, so I'm sure there's stuff that I missed. This game is very complicated, very deep, and not really your traditional Pokemon experience, while still giving that traditional Pokemon feel. Any other info or things that you think I missed, please feel free to leave in the comments. I really tried to cover balancing changes as opposed to just cosmetic things, like obviously all the vanities and things like that in Pokemon are kind of the fun little things of PokeMMO. I really wanted to stick this to PvP and PvM, relevant balancing changes that I feel like a new player would really want to know before starting their PokeMMO journey. If this video was helpful, once again, it helps me tremendously if you leave a like on the video and subscribing if you want to see more videos like this. Dislike if it wasn't and you knew everything on this list, that's also totally okay. I stream Monday through Thursday on Twitch, so if you want to see some streams of this game, lots of shiny hunting, make sure to check that out. My Discord is linked down below to ask more questions and see updates on when my content releases. And if my content has been entertaining enough or informative enough to be worth your time, going above and beyond with YouTube memberships, Twitch Primes, Twitch subs, and PayPal/Venmo donations really do allow me to do this and allow this channel to exist. And I give a huge thank you to everybody who goes above and beyond and supports at the end of every video, just like this. Hey, thanks so much for watching the entire video all the way to the end. I really appreciate that, and I hope it was a positive asset to your day. And I also want to quickly say extra thank you to everybody whose name is on this list and goes above and beyond and allows me to do what I do. Thank you very much. Have a good one.